Okay, I'm delighted to be joined by Matt Jones, who is the host of The Blue Room, a fantastic Everton podcast that's been going for a number of years now, I believe, Matt.
Oh, yeah, it has been. Yeah, it's been going since 2012. I wasn't involved in it then. It was set up by my colleague, Dave Downey, who used to work at Radio City Talk. And I think the Anfield Wrap was on Radio City Talk. That started, and I think in the interest of balance, they needed an Everton show. So Dave came up with the idea of The Blue Room in 2012. And it's been going ever since, despite Everton not doing all that much in that time. But I got involved in about 2014, 2015. So yeah, but it's been going since then.
Yeah, and it's a phenomenal success, isn't it? Because you've got a huge number of subscribers, huge number of listeners, and I think the interesting thing about those sort of fan-based podcasts is that you are able to interrogate areas of discussion that perhaps the mainstream media aren't particularly comfortable with.
Yeah, and I think it's one of them where I think that what we try and do is straddle sort of both of those horses, if you will. Because in one sense, I am a season ticket holder who goes to the game every week. Dave is the same. And a lot of the guests we have on are from a similar standpoint, and we actually go to the match with. But, I'm a qualified journalist, and Dave's a qualified journalist. And Paddy Boyland, who did a lot of work with us, who's now at The Athletic, of course, he's a qualified journalist as well. So I think what we like to try and do is sort of, we can approach it as a fan and as fans when we need to, like after the match, where I think people want to get that raw hit of, emotion after a big win or a devastating loss. Or we can, when a few days have gone and everyone wants to be a bit more analytical about things, take things with a bit more perspective, we can, like to think we can look at it from that point of view as well. So I think it's about straddling those two things. We're not going to be somebody who shouts and screams down a camera by any means. We're not going to write 2,000, 3,000 word pieces for the website. We like to be somewhere in between, and thankfully people like that. We get people listening to us from the city, we get people listening to us from across the country, and we get people listening to us from around the world as well. So it's good that we're getting a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds who are tuning in and taking what they want from it.
Mm. And I think that the thing I will point out about the Blue Room is that, because I've heard other football supporters actually criticising and complaining about some of their fan-based podcasts, is that it's very constructive. And I think you've got a good relationship with the club, actually, without being too up the arse of the club. You'll criticise when you think it needs to be criticised, but it's constructive. It's not daft, and as you say, it's not that sort of shock jock approach that one of the Arsenal podcasts. Yeah. We cut that line. I don't think that does anyone any favours. So I think the Blue Room has got the tone absolutely right.
Well, I think people, when you say the word fan media to a lot of people, they will immediately think of Arsenal Fan TV. And I think in a lot of respects, while that gets, gargantuan numbers and has done, it was a massive success from that point of view and a huge money maker, I think the way that is and the people who are on that, it sort of leaves a negative connotation for everybody else who's in a similar sort of industry. And, all the stuff we do is completely different to what they do. We don't do fan cams outside the stadium. We don't do watch-alongs and stuff like that. But I think people see fans doing things and immediately put them under that umbrella. And that is unfortunate, because I think one of my biggest frustrations, and I think this is a theme in football media as a whole, is that a lot of fans get treated like idiots. Yeah. You have pundits on the television who break the game down without doing any research in the most simple format. And I think what we see and what I see with people on the Blue Room is they like guests who come on and look at things from a different point of view. They like people who can articulate themselves well. They look at people who do research and analyse things. And I think that's something that's coming into football media, in the mainstream a little bit more. And that's a good thing, because like I said at the start of this point here, I think football fans sometimes get patted on the head and treated like they're idiots and just fed rubbish, whereas actually people who go to the match and people who watch their team every week are not stupid when it comes to football. They know their team. They know when people haven't done the research about their team, and ultimately that comes across in the work that people do, either on air, whether it's live, or preparing for a podcast or a TV show.
And in terms of where you've landed, Matt, as an Everton, how did you become a Blue?
It's not a very interesting story, to be honest. It's the classic. My dad was a Blue. So, never forgiven him to this day in some respects, but I became one as well. People always ask me what my first match was, but I can't actually remember.
Yeah.
I remember going to a pre-season game against Tranmere, I think in 1996, and we lost 3-0, which wasn't great. And it was obviously something that happened a few years later. There wasn't at Goodison Park, but me and my dad have been going the game together for a while now, but it's been tough for us, Frank. I mean, we've had a few new blues in the family from in-laws and stuff like that in recent years, but growing up, me and my dad were the only two blues in our family. The rest of them were reds. My mum and my sister are both reds. My granddad, my uncle, my aunties, the rest of my cousins, all of them were reds. So while it's obviously been much worse recently in terms of them sweeping the board with everything, growing up with them getting into cup finals and winning the Champions League in 2005 was a bit of a grind. But me and my dad have stood strong, thankfully, and are still slugging it out at Goodison Park every week. And when we can get there, yeah.
And it's character building, isn't it? So
yeah, that's the best way of looking at it, mate. Yeah, I think absolutely.
It lines you up for the knocks of life. So in terms of where the club is at the moment, I mean, we've been talking recently about new stadium developments, which is really exciting. The club, unlike during the David Moyes years and the early Premier League years, have spent lots of money, $500 million plus, I think, the last time I looked. Lots of new players have come in, but of course it hasn't quite worked out, and we've had more managers than you can shake a stick at in recent seasons. What do you think has stopped Everton from making that leap from a sort of mid-table, comfortable Premiership club into that sort of higher echelons of the league?
It's difficult to say one particular thing, but I always remember we spoke to Joe Royle for a series we did last summer called Diaries of an Old Lady, and he's absolutely, he's speaking about his favourite time at Goodison, but we sort of asked him about the current situation, and he said to me and Dave that he thinks the most important thing in football is recruitment. He said it's recruitment. If you get your recruitment of players right and your recruitment of staff right, then ultimately you are going to do well. And that sort of stuck with me since then. And I think if you look at what Everton have done in recent years, then you'd have to say that has been the issue, hasn't it? I think when we got Farhad Bashiri's investments, that we were all very excited because for so long we've been pigeonholed into this box of a team punching above the weight, a team that didn't have much money. The whole Everloan thing. Do you remember that in 2013-14 when we were getting grief for loaning all the players? And I think it was sort of a case like someone winning the lottery and just going in the shop and just buying everything they possibly could just because they could, wasn't it? And it's not done as good at all, has it? And I think for me the one issue is that they haven't got that recruitment right. They brought in a director of football in Steve Walsh, who'd never been a director of football before, and ultimately that failed. They brought in a manager in Ronald Koeman who was making his transfer decisions as well, and that those two seem to roll heads quite a lot. And I think there's, even up until this point now, and as we sit here recording this, it looks as though Carlo Ancelotti is very much taking the lead on transfers, and I imagine Marcel Brands is kicking his heels in his office thinking, what am I doing here? Yeah, and I suppose at the moment it could be a good thing. We'll have to wait and see. But I think they've never got that recruitment process streamlined for me. There's never been a summer where I've looked at and thought, I can see what the plan is here, whether it's to bring in players who are in the prime, bring in one or two players in the prime. It might cost a little bit more, but can have more of an impact on the team. Or say we're going to sign lads between the age of 19 and 23 and develop them and sell them on. There's never been a constant thread for me, and it seems that they flip-flop between the two a little bit too often. And what happens then, and I've used this word on the show for a while now, is you end up with a Frankenstein squad. You end up with a squad which is made up of players that have been brought in by different directors of football, by different managers who all want to play different styles of football. And that's sort of where we are now, I think, isn't it? You've got Gylfi Sigurdsson in there, who's brought in as a number 10, and Everton don't play a number 10 very often anymore. Alex Iwobi came in at the end of last summer again. He wants to play in that position. And it's sort of like they don't really know what to do with him. So there's a lot of players like that in the squad. But I think, the first thing from a positive point of view to say is that probably for the first time in my life, we've got a proven world-class manager in charge. We've got, 2 or 3 really good young players coming through. Got one of the best left-backs in the league. So it's not all doom and gloom in that sense. But I think what we could say is there's certainly a lot of work to do. But yeah, going back to the original question, I think Everton's recruitment has just been so poor that it's ultimately led to them constantly hitting the head on that ceiling and not being able to break through it.
Mm. I mean, you can always have hits and misses, can't you, with players?
Yeah.
It's the way of the football world, and you do see other clubs, you know, going out and making big signings that don't quite hit it off with for whatever reason. But the situation that had me scratching my head, and I think sums up the position that you've just outlined so well, Matt, was when we went out and signed Sigurdsson, and then we signed Klassen, and then we signed Rooney. And you've all of a sudden spent, you know, north of 80, 90 million on three players playing in the same position. So there does appear to have been that lack of strategic approach, doesn't there, to Everton signings? And that's gone on for too long, and you would hope Ancelotti would sort that out.
Yeah, and I think those three number 10s, that summer is the summer of the three number 10s and the summer of the captains, isn't it? We signed everyone's captain and then had no one who showed any leadership all season. But I think that those three sum it up perfectly, because I think that summer you had the director of football, Steve Walsh, who wanted Sigurdsson. You had Bill Kenwright and Farhad Moshiri, who wanted Wayne Rooney for that, emotional big name return. And you had Ronald Koeman, who wanted Davy Klassen at Ajax, and obviously someone who he'd worked with in the past and knew quite a lot about. So there was three players from the same position, the three different sections of the football club wanted. And instead of getting the heads together and saying, right, let's have a think about this, which one of these is going to be the best fit for our team in this one position where they can all play, they just went out, let's get all three of them instead and shoehorn the others in there. And, that sums up perfectly where Everton were at that point. And I think what Moshiri's done since he's come in is he's probably been a bit naive in thinking how easy it would be to get Everton into that top bracket, because the way in which Everton have done it is they've tipped. While I said the transfer strategy has been a bit all over the place, if I could put one blanket around it and say what Everton mainly have done since he come in is they've signed a lot of players who haven't quite cut it at those top bracket clubs, who are making a bit of a step down, and they're hoping to reignite that form which got them to that top club. And in some cases, it's worked. Certainly now Luca Dean's been a roaring success, hasn't he, for us? But most of the time, it's not quite worked out in that sense. And, the vast majority of the time, it's not quite worked out. And I think that sort of, to me, indicates that Moshiri thought, well, I can just get loads of these lads together who've been at top clubs. If we can get them all together and we're all playing well, we'll have a team that's befitting of being at that level. But I sort of get the sense as well that if you adhere to that strategy, all of a sudden you get a lot of lads at Finch Farm who've been at Barcelona, Man United, Chelsea, Arsenal, and they all look around and go, how do we get here? And I think that's a worrying thing, and I think that's probably Ancelotti's biggest challenge going forward. I think, Frank, in regards to, I think it's okay to make those sorts of signings, but I think it's really crucial you have the right environment to put those signings in. You need a squad that is full of players who are hungry, who are on the way up in their career. Basically, you need a squad for Richarlison's, Holgate's and Dominic Calvert-Lewin's, I think, in the main. Yeah. And if you've got those players with that sort of attitude who may not necessarily be wedded to Everton forever, because none of them have come through Everton's academy. They've all come from elsewhere. But players who are thinking, my career is still on an upward trajectory. And then if you drop a James Rodriguez into that, and 75% of them are of that mindset, I think all of a sudden you see a different player. But if you've got a squad full of those lads, which Everton have got at the moment, I think it's very much, like I said, you get that situation where they all sort of go, I was at Barcelona a couple of years ago. Now I'm at Everton, which is not nice to say about our own club, but it's probably true. So I think changing the culture of the club behind the scenes is a big challenge for Ancelotti. But it's something that you'd say is probably in line with his remit and in line with his attributes. You'd like to think he's going to be able to do that.
That's a great point you've made there. And I think Ancelotti said, didn't he, just before the end of the season, that what he wanted to do in this transfer window was evolution rather than revolution. And again, I know a lot of Evertonians were a bit disappointed with that statement. But for me, again, one of the problems we've had is, 7-8 players coming into the squad every season and then trying to bed them in. It's never the easiest thing to do. So if we can get the right 3 or 4, I think that would be a step in the right direction.
Yeah, totally agree, to be honest. And as much as the squad probably does need more in general, probably the 4 players I mentioned in Holgate, Richarlison, Calvert-Lewin and Dean, probably the 4 locks in the squad. You'd say the rest is probably up for grabs, isn't it? Really, the goalkeeper's going to play, but there are question marks about him. There's other players in the squad who will play, but there are question marks over them. But I think it's one of them where you sort of look at it going forward and think that if we do make 7 or 8 signings, like you said, it's going to take a while for them to integrate it. It's going to be hard. But in the same breath, you've got to look at the reason why Carlo Ancelotti is here. And like I said, he is a world-class manager and a world-class coach. And while we might be sitting here saying, Iwobi's not good enough, Bernard's not good enough, Andre Gomez has been poor, Michael Keane's hit and miss, his job is to make those lads better. Yeah. As a world-class manager, we should be sitting here and saying, obviously he's not responsible for what's gone on beforehand at the football club, and to a degree he's got a free pass. But he's been here for 9 months. That'll be 9 months, won't it? At the end of this week, he's been here for now. He's got to start making those players better as well, and I'm sure he will in time. It's not been the easiest periods for him to bed in and to get players on the training ground and improve them. But you like to think at the start of the season we'll see a bit more from some of those lads in the squad that maybe a few of us have written off. And then, like you said, if you can add 2 or 3 first team players around that, then hopefully you've got an upwardly mobile side. And I'm in total agreement there with you, mate, in regards to evolution. 2 or 3 players. You'd imagine 2 of them are going to be central midfielders, don't you? Maybe a right-sided player if he sees Rodriguez as that, I don't know. But instantly, I think when you look at the depth of quality in that area for Everton, if you put 2 capable lads in central midfield who can actually run a little bit, then all of a sudden you'd like to think that the rest of the team's going to go up a level as well.
Yeah. And so looking ahead for the new season, as we sit here, we've not made any new signings yet. But the talk is of Rodriguez, the lad from Watford, Decore, and Alan from Napoli. I don't know an awful lot about him, but clearly the managers worked with him before, rating. Who are we to argue with Carlo Ancelotti? Are you optimistic for the new season?
I don't know, really. It's a weird one, isn't it? Because it's sort of, I imagine if that team sheet comes out against Tottenham in a couple of weeks' time, and it's the same lads who finished the end of last season, and Everton lose, then you can imagine what social media would be like, can't you? It's going to be downbeat. No one's going to be feeling great about the campaign. No one's going to be really looking forward to it. But if you go into that Tottenham game and you've got one of those players in, and Everton play relatively well and get a draw, then all of a sudden I think things look a whole lot different. I do think that first game is really, really significant for Ancelotti, because I think Tottenham have made some quite smart signings as well. Højbjerg and Doherty, I think, are really good acquisitions for them, so they're going to be on it as well. I don't know. I think we've got players to be excited about, haven't we? That's the thing I'd say. I'm looking forward to seeing Richarlison play again, and I feel like he's approaching that level now, and he's got a season upcoming now where we're probably in the sort of mode where we should just enjoy him while he's here, because already he's had those, as much as he loves being here, I think, and has flung himself into the football club, he's already started dropping those quotes, hasn't he, in the press about, spoken to the manager about being here one more season. And you can't blame him. If Barcelona or someone come knocking for him next summer, then, fair dues. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do. I'm looking forward to seeing if Mason Holgate can put the form that he put in towards the end of last season over the course of an entire campaign. I'm looking forward to seeing if Dominic Calvert-Lewin can do the same. There's those things which I'm excited to see. I'd love to see James Rodriguez and what he can do in the Premier League. But at the moment, mate, all that optimism and all that those thoughts about the new season, which I'm sort of looking forward to, it's just a bit overshadowed by that black hole in midfield, because Everton have yet to fill that, and I think ultimately they will struggle to get points on the board in the Premier League unless they get mobile lads, tenacious lads, players who are better on the ball in that area of the pitch. Because if we go into the Tottenham with Andre Gomez and Tom Davies in central midfield, we know what will happen because we've seen what happened towards the end of last season. So I think it's dead important to get at least one through the door before that Spurs game. But sitting here right now, I'm not entirely hopeful, I've got to say.
I think Decore, for me, out of the 3, would be the pick, because I watched him quite a bit at Watford, seen him dictate a game at Goodison Park a couple of seasons ago now, I think it was. Big mobile unit, somebody who gets up and down the pitch, but a bit of a leader. I think that's what Everton lack massively, leaders.
Yeah, I think he scores goals as well, doesn't he, Decore? I remember him scoring an unbelievable header at the Park End where he leapt like a salmon. It was a ridiculous jump, and that was the night we drew 2-2. I think Lucadini scored a free kick, last kick of the game, and got us a point in the end. But Yeah, I like the look of him. I think his form probably tailed off a little bit last season, but Watford are a bit of a basket case football club, aren't they? So, he's going from one basket case football club to another one, I suppose, in that sense. So he should be used to it. But, you like to think with a little bit more stability around him, he'll kick on again. And, as much as I'd rather he was, 5 years younger coming to Everton in that sense, given the issues we've got in midfield, maybe some experience and some Premier League proven quality in there is not the worst thing in the world. But I think him and Alan are quite similar in the way they play. I think they're both sort of box-to-box players, which is good for a 4-4-2, really. I think you need two lads in there who are quite mobile. So that is important, yeah. I think getting those two through the door is going to be really key. But sort of like I said, mate, I think it's going to be one of them where we are getting tight now. What is it, 2 weeks tomorrow as we record this, the season starts again. Everton are going to have to do a lot of work quickly, I think, if they're going to be in through the door of Finch Farm and ready to play for that Tottenham game.
Yeah, it's a great point. And Matt, what would good look like to you this season? Where would you come May, look at is it May the season finishes?
Yeah, I think so, mate. Yeah.
You look at that final table, where would you sort of say, well, yeah, that's decent progress?
I've already thought about this yet. I think for me, it's more seeing a team. I know this is probably sitting on the fence here, but it's more seeing a team build throughout the season than where we finish. If I can look at Everton and say in May and say they're a much better side now than they were when they started the campaign, I think I'm all right with that. And if that means that we finish 10th, then so be it. What I would like to see is, and we say this at the start of every single season, take the cup seriously. Yeah. There's no reason why Everton shouldn't be going all out for the League Cup. There's no reason why they shouldn't be going all out for the FA Cup. And you look at someone like Ancelotti and his tactical acumen, his man management, and you say he is ideal for those competitions. He should be able to, if Everton get drawn at home, if you draw away to Man City, Chelsea, Liverpool, United, it's always going to be tough, isn't it, in those competitions? But if you get one of those sides at home, or a Leicester or a Wolves at home or away in those competitions, you like to think his acumen and his man management in a one-off game could see Everton through, and that gives me hope going into those competitions. But again, I think where we potentially got an issue there is that while as fans we're all desperate for us to win something and to have a nice day out at Wembley at the end of the season, probably those at the top of the football club are saying, well, Carlo, actually, it's probably more important you finish in the Europa League places come the end of the campaign. So there's probably a little bit of a difference there as well. But I just want to feel like we're getting better. I want nice days out in the cup. I want to feel like the team's moving forward, and I want to enjoy watching us. That's sort of where the James Rodriguez signing is really interesting to me, because if I've got me sensible head on, it's not really a signing I think Everton should be making. But in the same breath, you're sitting there going, bloody hell, I'd love to watch that lad, kick a football every week with his glorious left foot, because he can make special things happen on a football pitch. And I think when you're ultimately a mid-table team, which Everton unfortunately are now, those things are important, because you want to go to the match. You want to go to the match and you want to enjoy watching certain players and see what they can do and look forward to being in that stadium. And if you just got a bunch of plodders who finish 10th, it's not very enjoyable. But if you've got lads in there like Richarlison and Rodriguez who can make special things happen on a football pitch, then all of a sudden you've got that spring in your step going to Goodison Park again. So a bit of enjoyment and a bit of improvements probably is the best way to sum it up, mate, I think, next season.
Okay. And clearly, despite Carlo Ancelotti, we're not going to be challenging for the Premiership title. It looks as though it's going to be a two-horse race again between City and Liverpool.
You're not giving Chelsea a sniff?
I was saying earlier, actually, I like Frank Lampard. I think it's great to see, actually, isn't it? Young English manager doing as well as he did last season, and they've made some good signings. You think they've got a chance of breaking in?
I probably not. I think they'll probably be about 10 points short, but I'm really interested to see what they do, because they've confirmed the signing of Thiago Silva, today, haven't they? Another player who we were linked with, of course. I'm excited to see what he can do, but you just sort of think if that front line clicks they've got, and all chances probably are that it won't click immediately, but if Havertz, Ziyech and Werner, and then you can throw Pulisic into that, Mason Mount into that, that is serious firepower, isn't it? They are going to be so much fun to watch next year. And then in the same breath, I think as we sit here now, looking at the squads of every side, you probably say the Reds are the favourites. But if Man City can bring Messi in the next few weeks, which is obviously being talked about quite a lot, isn't it? Then you probably make them favourites again because he is simply that good a footballer. So probably, if you'd have to ask me right now, I'd probably say Liverpool are going to win it. But let's hope that Messi can come to the. I suppose as much as I imagine that there might be Reds watching this, you were saying, obviously they don't want a player like him to go to your main title rivals. If we can get back in stadiums again between now and the end of the season, he's a player everyone wants to see live.
Yeah, be great.
I went to the Camp Nou, probably back in 2012, and he came off the bench for the last 10 minutes of a cup game, and he scored twice. But I've always said I want to watch him in the flesh again before he retires. So even if it's in Manchester City, I think some players transcend that. They transcend who you support, and you just think, you're quite lucky to be watching this fella playing on a football pitch, and I think he would be that. I'd love to see him in the Premier League next season, not just to potentially stop the Reds winning the title, but for my own selfish personal reasons.
No, that's a good shout. And, one of the things that we've always said about the Premier League is that you have been able to see some amazing talent over the period that it's since it was established. And Messi will be top of the tree. There's no better than him. Matt, just before you go, I don't want to end on a note of talking about other clubs. You've mentioned a couple of occasions there with Tranmere Rovers that won't bring back particularly fond memories, but I want to ask you about, if you could go back in time to a particular match, what would that game be? What was sort of your most enjoyable experience as an Evertonian?
It's hard that because my generation, certainly the last 15 years have been going to match for. We've obviously been in finals and stuff. We've been in one final rather, but that's it. I think for me the two that stand out are 2009 semi against United at Wembley when Jag scored that penalty. Absolutely horrendous 20 minutes of football, 120 minutes of football, but those penalty kicks, and it was just the total un-Everton nature of it for me. Obviously Tim Cahill missed the first one, didn't he? And you think, here we go, we're going to lose. And then they managed to turn it around, and Jags having missed against Fiorentina the year before, to see him slot it away was fantastic. I was just running around. I didn't know what to do, where to go. It was a wonderful day, that. And the other one that stands out is, in terms of just an actual day, it was when we were in the Europa League in 2014, this would have been. And we went to Wolfsburg, and we went to played Young Boys, I think, in the knockout round. And those two away trips were just magnificent. My first time going to watch Everton abroad in Europe, about 7 or 8 of us with my mates, going to Berlin and getting the train to Wolfsburg, and, everyone's singing before the game there. And then Bern was just on another level. I mean, I don't know if you went to either of those games.
Unfortunately,
but Switzerland was absolutely magnificent. Yeah. And they won 4-1 away that night, and Rom scored a hat-trick. But I just remember everyone going crazy at half time. The build up to it, everyone was in the street in Bern playing footy and all that. And that's the sad thing, really. And I think why it always baffles me when people say they don't want Everton to get in Europe, because I think back to those days and think they're probably the best days of my life supporting Everton. That is what it's all about. Yeah. Going away with your mates, being on the ale all day, having a kick around, and then seeing Everton beat someone in Europe in one corner of a mad European country or something like that. That's what it's all about to me. So probably those. Well, I said 3 in the end, didn't I? But the European trips in particular do 100% stand out for me.
Yeah. Matt, it's been great talking to you as always, and
likewise.
Good to see you on the other end of the interview for a change. And listen, mate, good luck with the Blue Room for the forthcoming season as well. You do a great job, and I'm looking forward to tuning in.
Thanks for the kind words, mate. And of course, it's been great having you on recently as well. And no doubt you'll be on again soon.
Top man. Thanks, Matt.
Cheers, mate.